Funny how the same people who tried to break you are now breaking a sweat trying to understand how you're still standing. Let that burn a little, my dear chosen ones, because that's exactly what's happening. The ones who counted you out are now counting the days since they last slept peacefully. The ones who whispered behind your back are now whispering your name in regret. And the ones who thought you were easy to destroy are finally realizing they picked a battle with someone who was never built to break. Welcome, my chosen ones. Come closer. You need to hear this with every ounce of your spirit. People talk about being chosen like it's all light, applause, and perfect timing. They imagine blessings falling from the sky, opportunities lining up perfectly, and life treating you like royalty. But you and I both know that's not the story. The reality is far more raw, far more powerful, far more uncomfortable. Being chosen doesn't just make you different, it makes you a threat. And threats attract enemies before they attract recognition. You've been attacked, misunderstood, underestimated, envied, betrayed, and misread more times than you can count. And still, somehow, you walk out of every storm looking untouched, unbothered, and upgraded. That alone drives people insane. They wonder, how did the chaos miss them? How did the darkness skip them? How did the destruction bounce off like rubber? What they don't understand is this: chosen ones move differently. You're wired differently. You carry a frequency that trouble can't decode and negativity can't anchor into. Here's the part most people never talk about. When someone is chosen, life doesn't just protect them, it evolves them. Deep wounds sharpen intuition. Pain trains perception. Rejection unlocks clarity. Every hit you took didn't weaken you, it recalibrated you. The trauma you survived didn't break you, it upgraded your internal system. Think of yourself like rare metal. The hotter the fire, the stronger you become. That's why you glow different. That's why they regret touching you. That's why even darkness itself knew better than to take you out. My dear chosen ones, you didn't just survive the battles, they survived you. And now the same people who threw dirt on your name are choking on the dust of your comeback. They scroll through your life like investigators, trying to understand how someone they tried to bury came back blooming. They stalk your glow like it owes them an explanation. They rehearse conversations they'll never have, all while pretending they're unbothered. But you can feel the regret dripping off their silence. And I know what you're thinking. Why me? Why do I go through so much? Why am I always the target, always the misunderstood one, always the one fighting invisible battles? Because chosen ones aren't here to blend in, they're here to expose, elevate, and transform. Your existence alone disrupts the comfort of those who benefit from illusions. Your presence alone challenges the narratives people build to avoid accountability. You're a mirror, a catalyst, a shift in human form. So listen closely. What you're about to step into is bigger than revenge, bigger than validation, bigger than closure. This isn't about proving them wrong, it's about stepping into the version of yourself they never believed you'd reach. The plot twist is that the very pressure they hoped would crush you ended up polishing you. And now the glow they mocked is the glow they can't escape. Fasten your seatbelt, chosen one. What's coming next for you? It's not just a message, it's a reckoning, an awakening. A reminder that when you're truly chosen, even the shadows move out of your way. My chosen ones. Before we go any deeper, take a moment and breathe in this truth. You're not watching this by accident. The very fact that you're here means you're stepping into a version of yourself that your enemies never thought you'd reach. If you're feeling that fire rising, the recognition, the "oh my God, this is literally my life" moment, don't just sit there. Lock in with us. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop 17 in the comments if you're done letting regret-filled people rent space in your energy. And if you want to show extra love, hit that super thanks. It helps us keep delivering messages for the ones the world underestimated. And now, lean closer. Because what comes next, it's not just information, it's confirmation. If you are a true chosen one, you're about to feel every word hit like déjà vu, because these are the exact signs that have followed you your whole life. Only the chosen get these kinds of shifts. Ordinary people don't carry this kind of weight or this kind of protection. Let's dive straight into it. Number 1. Your energy was so rare, even your enemies had to step back and recalculate. Your aura was so unfiltered, even your enemies had to think twice before stepping wrong. They didn't back away because they respected you. They backed away because your energy exposed every lie they were hiding behind. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about something people rarely admit out loud. Your presence alone has shaken entire rooms without you lifting a finger. And the funny part, you weren't even trying. You were just being yourself, minding your business, breathing in your truth. Yet somehow that was enough to make the wrong people panic, like they just heard their name called in a courtroom. See, when you're truly chosen, you don't need to roar to be powerful. Your silence hits harder than their noise. Your authenticity cuts deeper than their manipulation. And your energy, it reads people like an open book. That's why they felt exposed around you. That's why they whispered. That's why they avoided eye contact one moment and obsessed over you the next. And I know what you might be wondering. Why did certain people treat me like a threat when all I ever did was show love? Because chosen one, you weren't just showing love, you were showing truth. And truth is something that pretenders can't survive. Your aura has always operated like a built-in lie detector. Fake intentions glitch around you. Hidden motives crumble in your presence. People don't get nervous because you're aggressive. They get nervous because you're transparent. You're too real, too tuned in, too aware. You don't play their games, and that alone is enough to break their strategy. Picture this. Imagine you're a bright light in a room full of shadows. You don't have to chase the shadows, expose them, or name them. Just by existing, you make them scatter. That's why plots against you always fell apart mid-air. That's why gossip about you never landed the way they hoped. And that's why every attempt to dim you ended up dimming them. What felt like luck was actually your natural protection. What looked like delays or detours were actually barriers shielding you from hits you were never meant to absorb. While others were getting torn apart by the same energies, your path stayed mysteriously cushioned. Attacks would approach you, but never fully connect. People would try you, but couldn't break you. Situations would rise against you, but somehow collapse under their own weight before reaching your core. You weren't avoiding disasters. Those disasters were avoiding you. And here's the part that floors your enemies every time. You weren't even aware of the magnitude of your own power. You were just trying to survive, trying to heal, trying to figure out why life felt heavier for you than for others. Meanwhile, the forces working against you were scrambling, recalculating, panicking, trying to understand why you wouldn't fall like everyone else did. Because chosen ones don't fall, they transform. And now, my chosen ones, the same people who once believed they could shake you, are now watching you rise with a strength they can't touch, a glow they can't dim, and a resilience they can't comprehend. They tried to play chess with someone who is the whole board. And trust me, that realization hits them harder than any revenge ever could. Number 2, they don't just regret losing you. They regret mishandling someone they were never built to hold. They didn't just regret losing you. They regret mishandling a human they never deserved to touch. Some people don't realize they were standing on sacred ground until the earthquake hits after you leave. My dear chosen ones, let's get something straight right now. The regret they feel isn't just about losing you. It runs deeper, sharper, heavier. They're not losing sleep because you walked away. They're losing sleep because they finally realized they mishandled someone who carried a level of value their hands were never meant to hold. They treated you like ordinary because they couldn't comprehend extraordinary. They tried to play with you because they couldn't recognize they were standing in the presence of someone rare. They thought you were just another person they could manipulate, love bomb, use for comfort, drain for energy, or drop when convenient. They thought you were easy to replace, easy to mimic, easy to forget. But chosen ones, we are not replaceable, we are not forgettable, we are not refillable in anyone's life. You were never regular. You were alignment, you were elevation, you were peace in human form, you were the breakthrough they were too immature to handle. And now, now the regret is starving them from the inside out. Because life after losing you doesn't feel like life, it feels like a downgrade they accidentally chose. They thought they were making a bold move, but they were actually stepping backwards into their own downfall. Chosen ones, let me speak to your spirit for a moment. You weren't just someone they dated, befriended, or shared space with. You were the clarity they didn't know they needed. You were the calm in their chaos. You were the reminder of what real connection feels like. Something pure, something honest, something grounding. And because they couldn't recognize the depth of it, they mishandled it like children holding diamonds they thought were glass. And now that you're gone, everything hits different. That peace they felt around you, gone. That stability you brought, gone. That sense of direction your presence provided, gone. The ability to breathe without anxiety, gone. Their life feels heavier because you were the light. Their world feels smaller because you expanded their vision. Their relationships feel shallow because you had depth they couldn't fake or replace. And let's be real, chosen ones, they didn't just lose you. They lost the version of themselves they were becoming because of you. Being connected to you made them better, sharper, calmer, more grounded. Losing you dragged them right back into the chaos they thought they'd escaped. Now they're sitting in rooms that used to feel warm, but now feel cold. They're surrounded by people who can offer attention, but not connection. They're trying to fill a void that can't be filled with noise, distractions, or temporary comfort. Because the truth is this, mishandling a chosen one comes with consequences. Not supernatural punishment, just the natural collapse that happens when someone removes the one person who kept their life balanced. They didn't just lose you. They lost access to the peace, the growth, the alignment, the elevation that came with you. And that kind of regret, it doesn't fade. It follows them. It haunts them. It reminds them every single day of the person they threw away while reaching for crumbs. Chosen one, they didn't just regret losing you. They regret ever being foolish enough to think they could mishandle someone like you and walk away unaffected. Number 3, your potential was so explosive, even darkness knew better than to push too far. Your purpose was so unshakable that even darkness realized it was safer not to touch you. My dear chosen ones, let me break this down in a way that hits straight through the noise. They didn't leave you alone out of mercy. They left you alone out of strategy. That's the part nobody tells you. You weren't avoided because you were weak. You were avoided because your energy carried consequences. Your presence came with a ripple effect that anything chaotic, manipulative, or deceptive knew it couldn't survive. You were the kind of person that pressure couldn't crush and confusion couldn't capture. So, instead of trying to destroy you head-on, the forces working against you decided it was safer to observe you from a distance. And that should already tell you how powerful you are. You weren't just another soul moving through life. You were a walking disturbance to anything rooted in low vibration, hidden agendas, or psychological warfare. Your clarity, your intuition, your authenticity. They weren't normal. They were disruptive. They were threatening. You didn't have to raise your voice or prove your worth. Just existing in a room could shift the energy. Just speaking the truth could crack illusions. You were an earthquake disguised as a human. And trust me, chosen one, everything that tries to hide in darkness feels that tremor long before you do. You might look back at your life and ask yourself, why did certain people start acting strange out of nowhere? Why did opportunities freeze right before they reached me? Why did connections that seemed promising suddenly collapse? It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't bad luck. It was interference, a strategic attempt to slow you down, because eliminating you wasn't an option. You were too impactful to remove. You were too influential to silence. Your voice, your insight, your future, they held the kind of potential that would cause more harm to your enemies if they ever pushed too far. So they settled for distraction, delays, pressure, confusion, anything that would exhaust you without destroying you. But here's where they messed up. Chosen ones don't break under pressure. They decode it. You didn't collapse. You evolved. Every setback sharpened your instincts. Every betrayal increased your awareness. Every blocked path redirected you to a higher one. They didn't realize that keeping you untouched wasn't protecting you. It was protecting them from the aftermath of waking your full power too early. Because once a chosen one wakes up, once they realize who they are and what they carry, the game changes instantly. And look at you now, awake, alert, self-aware, unapologetic. They tried to keep you second-guessing yourself, but all they did was delay the inevitable, your rise. You weren't just protected, chosen one. You were preserved, put on ice like something rare, something valuable, something that needed to be unveiled at the right time. And now, that time has arrived. Your purpose is too potent for anything to destroy. Your journey is too aligned for anyone to derail. They didn't leave you untouched because you were vulnerable. They left you untouched because you were untouchable, and now they're forced to watch you step into the power they hoped you'd never discover. Number 4. You became living proof that destiny can be paused, but never erased. You became the walking proof that destiny doesn't die, it just waits for the right moment to hit back harder. My dear chosen ones, let's make something very clear. They truly thought they had you finished. They thought the smear campaigns, the cold shoulders, the silent treatments, the manipulation, the emotional hits, the chaos they stirred up behind the scenes were enough to erase you. They thought if they piled enough weight on your shoulders, you would eventually collapse and stay down. But what they never understood is this. Chosen ones aren't powered by approval, they're powered by purpose. And purpose is something no enemy, no smear, no setback, and no betrayal has the authority to cancel. It can be delayed. It can be paused. It can be pushed into the shadows for a moment, but it can never be deleted from your story. They assumed that if they attacked your character long enough, you'd forget who you were. They believed if they drained your energy and distorted your name, you'd fade into the background. They hoped your silence meant defeat. They prayed your disappearance meant destruction. But chosen ones don't disappear. They evolve. Those quiet seasons they mistook for endings were actually incubations. You weren't being erased. You were being restructured. You weren't breaking. You were being refined into someone even sharper, even bolder, even more untouchable than before. And I know at one point it felt heavy. You questioned everything, your path, your strength, your worth. You wondered, why does it feel like everything is falling apart at once? You didn't realize you were in the middle of a reset so powerful that even the universe had to shake things loose to elevate you properly. The chaos wasn't your burial, it was your construction site. You were being rebuilt quietly while they were laughing loudly. They didn't know you were gathering strength in silence, recharging your spirit, sharpening your mind, preparing for a return that would make your absence unforgettable. Then came the moment they never saw coming, your re-emergence. Stronger, wiser, sharper, more aligned, more resilient, more you than you've ever been. And now the same people who wanted you unheard are the ones forced to hear about your growth. The ones who tried to dim your light are now blinded by your glow. The ones who pushed you away are now haunted by the fact that they can no longer reach you. Here's the part that stings them the most. Your comeback wasn't accidental. They contributed to it. Every hit they threw only pushed you deeper into your power. Every doubt they cast only strengthened your resolve. Every attempt to break you forced you to level up. They didn't stop your destiny. They activated it. They didn't bury you. They watered you. They didn't win. They awakened the version of you they feared ever meeting. So now they sit in regret, stuck watching the rise of someone they swore would fall. Someone they underestimated. Someone who became the living testament to this truth. Destiny doesn't crumble under pressure. It crystallizes. And my chosen ones, you are that crystallized destiny. Undeniable, unstoppable, unforgettable. Number 5, you shook them because you were both their trigger and their truth teller without saying a word. You confused them because you were the threat and the mirror they didn't want to face. My dear chosen one, this is where things get real. You didn't confuse people because you were chaotic. You confused them because you were clear, crystal, transparent. And clarity is dangerous in a world where so many survive off masks. The moment you walked into their life, you unknowingly held up a mirror they were never prepared to look into. And that mirror didn't show them your flaws. It showed them their own, their insecurities, their performative confidence, the gaps between the identity they advertised and the identity they actually lived. That alone made your presence feel like a threat, even though all you were doing was existing, healing, growing, staying true to yourself. You weren't loud, you weren't competing, you weren't begging for attention. Yet somehow, without raising your voice or lifting a finger, you shook entire rooms. Your silence was louder than their noise. Your inner growth was more intimidating than their outer performance. And every time they tried to figure out what made you different, they got frustrated because nothing about you was forced. Everything about you was real. And that kind of authenticity exposes the people who are pretending just to survive. Think about it, chosen one. They didn't envy you because you had the most. They envied you because you were the most. More grounded, more self-aware, more aligned, more emotionally intelligent. People can't stand when someone embodies the traits they've been faking. You became the walking reminder that their shortcuts, illusions, and facades weren't fooling anyone, not even themselves. Your truth made their excuses invalid. Your growth made their stagnation uncomfortable. Your peace irritated their chaos. Your purpose revealed their confusion. And your light made their shadows impossible to hide. You ever notice how some of them gave you those strange compliments that didn't feel like compliments? Or the sudden tension that made no sense? Or the secret competition you never signed up for? That's because they couldn't love you properly. Their ego wouldn't allow it. Loving you would require admitting you triggered something in them, something they weren't ready to confront. So instead of growing, they chose resentment. Instead of doing their inner work, they chose comparison. Instead of being inspired, they chose insecurity in disguise. You became the paradox they couldn't decode. Too genuine to hate, too powerful to control, too humble to brag, too consistent to dismiss. You didn't play the game, yet you kept rising. You didn't follow the crowd, yet the crowd couldn't stop watching you. And that tore them apart because deep down, they knew you were real, real in a way they hadn't seen in years, real in a way that exposed every corner of their artificial world. Chosen one, listen closely. You weren't their enemy. You were their mirror, their trigger, their wake-up call. And when people aren't ready to face themselves, they either retreat or attack. They tried to dim you, distract you, and distort you, not because you were wrong, but because you were right. Not because you were a threat to their life, but because you were a threat to their illusions. But here's the part that stings them the most. You didn't break, you didn't shrink, you didn't lose your shine. And now, every time they see you, they're reminded not of what you took from them, but of what they refused to become. Number 6. You showed them the exit from their own chaos, but they clung to their chains like comfort blankets. You were the door out of their darkness, but they chose to lock themselves in. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about one of the most painful truths you've had to swallow. You weren't just a person in their life, you were their exit route, their open door, their lifeline. But instead of stepping into the freedom you represented, they clung to their chains like comfort blankets. And here's the part that hits different. They didn't reject you because you lacked value. They rejected you because stepping into the level you carried would have forced them to confront who they really were. And nothing terrifies a trapped mind more than the chance to be free. You walked into their life with the kind of clarity most people spend decades searching for. You came with perspective, emotional intelligence, growth energy, elevation energy, the type of presence that doesn't just sit quietly in a room, but rearranges the entire atmosphere. You were the crack of light in their dark hallway, the open window in their suffocating space, the shift they secretly prayed for but never imagined would show up wearing your face. Yet when you arrived, they didn't embrace you, they panicked. Because light doesn't just illuminate the path forward. It also exposes everything people work hard to bury. And chosen ones, you didn't show up to make them comfortable. You showed up to make them conscious. You didn't show up to coddle their wounds. You showed up to help them heal. You didn't show up to enable their cycles. You showed up to break them. You challenged their excuses, disrupted their patterns, and shattered every illusion they used to protect their ego. Of course they labeled you the problem. Of course they projected their insecurities onto you. Of course they ran, because facing you meant facing themselves, and they weren't ready for that kind of honesty. People swear they want growth until growth demands the version of them they've been pretending doesn't exist. They swear they want healing until healing asks them to let go of the pain they've turned into personality. They swear they want elevation until elevation requires accountability. The truth is, some people don't want wings. They want to decorate their cage. They don't want freedom. They want familiarity. And you, my chosen one, were a threat to the comfort they found in their own dysfunction. You offered them the chance to evolve, to elevate, to rewrite their entire life story. But instead of choosing breakthrough, they chose the same old patterns, the same old wounds, the same old cycles. Not because your love wasn't enough, but because their fear felt safer. Understand this. They didn't reject you. They rejected the version of themselves they were afraid to become. And now, they're looping, repeating the same mistakes, battling the same demons, sitting in the same stale pain, knowing deep down they fumbled the one person who could have changed everything. They lost the cure and held on to the sickness. They kept the chains and threw away the key. You weren't the problem, you were the exit. They just weren't ready to walk out. Number 7, they didn't sabotage you. They sabotaged the one chance they had to level up. They never realized they were sabotaging their own breakthrough. My dear chosen ones, let's tell the truth with full force. Some people thought they were winning when they whispered your name like poison. They thought they were scoring points when they twisted your intentions, lied on you, and tried to turn others against you. They felt powerful taking cheap shots in the dark, convinced that attacking you would somehow elevate them. But here's the plot twist they never saw coming. Every move they made against you was a move against themselves. They weren't damaging your destiny. They were detonating their own. They weren't plotting your downfall. They were pulling the plug on their own progress. You were never the obstacle. You were actually the opportunity. Chosen one, you weren't placed in their life randomly. Your presence was a catalyst, a doorway, a shift they didn't even recognize. You were the one bringing clarity into their confusion. You were the one calming storms they created. You were the one amplifying their potential simply by being in their circle. You offered support they didn't deserve, understanding they didn't value, and loyalty they couldn't reciprocate. You were helping them level up without them even realizing it. But ego is blinding. Jealousy is loud. Insecurity turns blessings into threats. They couldn't see past their own shadows long enough to realize you were the light trying to pull them out. And the irony? You were the only person truly in their corner. You saw their hidden wounds, the childhood scars, the emotional knots they carried but pretended didn't exist. You recognized their patterns before they did. You held space for their healing even when they made excuses for their dysfunction. You tried to lift them, encourage them, protect them, even carry weight that didn't belong to you. And still, they decided to paint you as the villain, not because you did wrong, but because your presence exposed everything they refused to confront. Chosen one, understand this. Their betrayal wasn't just a break in loyalty, it was a break in alignment. They didn't just cut you off. They cut off the momentum, growth, and evolution that came with being connected to someone like you. The moment they moved in malice, they severed the very lifeline that was elevating them. That's why things started falling apart. That's why their peace evaporated. That's why opportunities dried up. They weren't cursed. They simply removed the one person who was buffering their chaos. And now, they're living in the fallout of their own choices. The very pain they wanted you to feel is sitting in their lap. The very setbacks they hoped would crush you are now weighing down their own path. Not because you wished harm on them. Chosen ones don't need to get revenge. Life does its own balancing act. They aimed at you and hit themselves. They tried to dim you and darken their own room. They never understood that plotting against someone chosen doesn't just miss, it backfires. They weren't sabotaging a person, they were sabotaging their own redemption. And that's a loss they'll feel long after the apology they'll never have the courage to give. Number 8. The ones who laughed at your pain are now silenced by the echo of their own actions. The ones who laughed at your struggle are now suffocating on their own silence. My dear chosen ones, this part is going to hit different because it speaks to a chapter of your life you survived without applause, without backup, and without sympathy. There was a time, your darkest season, when you weren't just hurting, you were drowning, and instead of stretching out a hand to help, they pulled up a chair. Your pain became their entertainment. Your struggle became the highlight of their conversations. They watched your life fall apart like it was a reality show, and they were the committed audience. They didn't just witness your heartbreak, they indulged in it like it was dessert. Watching you crumble made them feel whole. Watching you struggle made them feel superior. Watching you hurt gave them a twisted sense of power. And deep down, chosen one, that's because your existence always challenged them, even when you were on the floor. Some pretended to care. You know the ones, the fake check-ins, the half-hearted "you okay" messages, but the smirks behind your back told the real story. They weren't checking on you to support you. They were checking to see how badly life had hit you. They were measuring your downfall like it was a scoreboard. Your lowest moments were their highest satisfaction. They thought your silence meant defeat. They thought your isolation meant failure. They thought your breakdown meant you were done for good. They really believed your darkness was permanent. They thought this was the end of your story. But chosen ones have something they always overlook, an inner fire that refuses to die. You weren't collapsing, you were recalibrating. You weren't broken, you were rebuilding. You weren't finished, you were forming a version of yourself they would never be prepared to face. And now, oh now the plot twist is delicious. You didn't just get back up, you came back transformed. You came back glowing in ways that expose their shadows. You came back growing in ways that highlight their stagnation. You came back guarded in ways that show you finally learned who deserved access and who didn't. And suddenly, silence. loud, suffocating, heavy silence. Not because they're at peace, not because they've moved on, but because they can't even form your name in their mouths without choking on the memory of how badly they misread you. Your success is now their mirror, and they can't stand the reflection. Every accomplishment you make reminds them of their cruelty. Every elevation you step into reminds them of their pettiness. Every glow-up you achieve reminds them that they celebrated too early. Their silence used to feel like rejection, but now it feels like regret, and you can taste it. They can't clap for you because clapping for you would mean admitting they were wrong about you. They can't congratulate you because acknowledging your rise means acknowledging their own lack of growth. They can't support you because your shine exposes who they really are. Their pride is choking them harder than life ever could. Their silence isn't confidence, it's punishment. And the best part? They earned every moment of it. Chosen one, the very people who laughed at your suffering are now speechless in the presence of your survival. And trust me, they're not just quiet, they're drowning in the echo of their own actions. Number 9, you weren't a person they failed. You were the opportunity they weren't evolved enough to recognize. You were the test they failed. And now your success is the lesson they can't escape. My dear chosen ones, some people never realized that your presence in their life wasn't random, it was revealing. You weren't just a face passing through their timeline, you were a moment of truth disguised as a human being. You were the mirror they weren't ready to look into, the shift they weren't prepared to handle, the opportunity they weren't evolved enough to recognize. You didn't come with flashing lights or dramatic entrances. You came in quietly, humbly, authentically, and that alone exposed everything they were trying to hide behind their confidence, their ego, their performance. You didn't test them on purpose, chosen one. Your energy did, your integrity did, your consistency did, and the way they treated you was the answer to a question they didn't even know they were being asked. Because here's the truth nobody likes to admit. People reveal their character when they think there's no reward in treating someone well. You didn't come offering power, clout, or advantage. You came offering genuine connection, loyalty, truth, and elevation. And to someone who wasn't ready for that level of depth, it felt threatening. So instead of rising, they shrank. Instead of valuing you, they dismissed you. Instead of matching your sincerity, they mocked it. They didn't just fail the test. They broadcasted their failure through jealousy, comparison, manipulation, and disrespect. They exposed themselves louder than you ever could have. And chosen one, I know you've wondered, why did they treat me like that when all I did was show up with good intentions? Because your presence demanded authenticity, and they preferred their illusions. You brought clarity, and clarity is uncomfortable for people who survive off confusion. You brought growth, and growth terrifies those who cling to stagnation. You brought truth, and truth feels like an attack to someone who lives in denial. You didn't challenge them directly, but your existence challenged everything they weren't ready to confront. That's why they ran. That's why they sabotaged. That's why they mishandled you. Now look at the plot twist. They're watching you rise from the sidelines with that heavy, sinking feeling in their chest. The realization that they mishandled something rare, something they will not encounter twice. You became the example, not because you wanted revenge, but because life has a way of turning tables without you lifting a finger. Your evolution is the lesson. Your elevation is the reminder. Your glow is the truth they can't escape. While they stayed stuck repeating the same cycles, you outgrew the version of yourself they once thought they could step on. Your success is not petty. It's poetic. It's the universe saying, see, this is what happens when someone treats a chosen one correctly, and this is what happens when they don't. They thought they were pushing away someone ordinary. They didn't know they were pushing away alignment, clarity, elevation, and a version of themselves they were meant to grow into. You didn't just enter their life, they were being measured by how they treated you. And now, chosen one, your journey forward is the proof they failed the test, and your glow-up is the curriculum they're forced to study from afar. Let them watch, let them regret, let them learn, because you are the lesson and the level they'll never reach again. Number 10. Your presence exposed what their masks never could hide. Your presence unmasked their shadows long before they ever admitted they had any. My dear chosen ones, let's get real about this one, because it hits harder than people want to admit. You didn't expose them, your presence did. And that's exactly why they ran. It wasn't your words, your actions, or your attitude. In fact, you were the calmest energy in the room. You walked in softly, respectfully, minding your own business, carrying nothing but truth, clarity, and a presence that spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. Yet somehow, they reacted like they were standing in front of a spotlight with all their cracks showing. You see, chosen ones don't have to say much to make people uncomfortable. Your aura does the talking. Your frequency does the scanning. Your energy does the revealing. It's like the moment you step into a space. Every hidden motive, every lie, every suppressed insecurity gets tugged to the surface. Not because you're trying to expose them, but because your very existence demands honesty. And not everyone is ready for that kind of exposure. Think of yourself like a spiritual mirror, polished and powerful. People look at you and suddenly see the parts of themselves they've been running from, the resentment they buried, the insecurities they disguised as confidence, the jealousy they masked as concern. You didn't cause the discomfort, you just made it impossible for them to ignore. And when someone is committed to hiding from themselves, the last thing they want is to stand near the one person who sees straight through the performance. Chosen one, this is why they whispered that you changed. This is why they said you became too much, too deep, too intense, or too aware. But what they were really saying was, I can't pretend around you anymore. Your growth made them question their stagnation. Your healing highlighted their avoidance. Your authenticity stripped the shine off their act. And nothing terrifies a person wearing a mask more than someone who can see the face underneath. They didn't distance themselves to protect their peace. They distanced themselves to protect their illusions. Being around you was like standing next to an alarm they couldn't silence. Every tick reminding them of the work they refused to do. That's why they blamed you. That's why they projected. That's why they labeled you the toxic one. It's easier to demonize the mirror than admit the reflection is the issue. And yes, it stings when people you cared for suddenly flee without explanation. But chosen one, hear this clearly. They didn't leave because you were harmful. They left because they were exposed. Their shadows couldn't breathe in your light. Their demons suffocated in your clarity. Their fake confidence evaporated in the presence of your realness. Deep down, beneath their pride and excuses, they know exactly what happened. Your presence didn't hurt them. It awakened them. And awakening is terrifying when someone prefers sleepwalking through life. You were never the enemy. You were the catalyst. And catalysts rarely get thanked. They get avoided. But avoidance is just fear in disguise, and fear always reveals who wasn't strong enough to stand beside a chosen one. Number 11. Even your toughest season had an expiration date, and your comeback terrified everything betting against you. Even your darkness knew your pain had an expiration date. My dear chosen ones, there's a reason everything in your life once felt like it was collapsing at the exact same time. The pressure, the betrayal, the isolation, the emotional exhaustion that hit you like a tidal wave. It wasn't coincidence, and it wasn't because you were weak. It was because you were reaching the edge of a massive shift, and even the darkest energies around you felt it coming before you did. When a chosen one is about to elevate, the tension always rises. The noise gets louder, the tests get heavier, the people you trusted pull away, the world feels like it's squeezing you into a corner, not because you were doing something wrong, but because you were outgrowing everything that once held you back. And here's the truth nobody told you. Your suffering had a deadline. Even the forces working against you, whether you call it negativity, shadow energy, low-frequency sabotage, or simply life's storms, knew they couldn't hold you forever. They could delay you, distract you, drain you, but they couldn't own you. They couldn't stop what was building inside you. So instead, they panicked. They threw everything at you at once, hoping you'd tap out before your breakthrough arrived. You ever notice how the hardest hit always comes right before the breakthrough? How the last part of the storm feels the most personal, the most painful, the most suffocating? That wasn't punishment. Chosen one. That was the final stretch. That was the last desperate attempt to derail you because your glow-up was already in motion. You were breaking out of cycles, shedding old identities, stepping out of emotional cages you didn't even realize you were living in. And the closer you came to the exit, the more violently the old world tried to pull you back. Everything that rose against you during that time wasn't random. It was reaction, a reaction to your evolution, a reaction to your awakening, a reaction to the power you were stepping into, whether you could see it or not. You weren't just surviving anymore, you were transforming. You weren't begging for peace, you were turning into peace. And that terrified the very energies that once fed off your insecurity, your confusion, your self-doubt. That's why the attacks became strangely personal. That's why people switched up without warning. That's why opportunities disappeared overnight. That's why your mind felt like a battlefield. Because you were almost out. Almost free, almost untouchable in a way you had never been before. Once you recognized your worth, once you reclaimed your voice, once you stepped into who you truly were, every negative force that once had influence over you lost its grip. They knew it, you felt it, and that's why the final moments hurt the most. But chosen one, you didn't fold, you didn't break, you didn't give up. You pushed through the part that was designed to make you surrender. And now look at you, living proof that suffering doesn't last forever. Pain has a timeline. Darkness has a limit. And no matter what tried to hold you down, it couldn't survive your awakening. Your story is the reminder pain may knock, but it never gets to stay. Not when a chosen one is destined to rise. Whenever you're ready, drop the next one. And chosen ones. As we reach the end of this message, let this sink in. Everything they tried to use against you became the very fuel that pushed you into your unstoppable season. Their regret is loud, but your rise is louder. Your journey is the proof that nothing, no darkness, no enemy, no setback, can stop someone who's built to ascend. If this resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe for more truth your enemies can't stand, and drop 77 in the comments if you're claiming your chosen one power. And don't forget, share this with someone who needs that reminder.